Good afternoon. Jambo. So we have two types of audience. Good afternoon to our online participant. Good morning, depending on where you're joining us. And welcome to this webinar. My name is Joseph Karanja. I'm part of the UNESCO team, specifically for the local and indigenous knowledge systems. I support the BES-Net work on the incorporation of indigenous and local knowledge in the BES-Net component. So it's my great honor to welcome you to this webinar on embracing indigenous and local knowledge as part of the paradigm shift to support the implementation of the Kumin-Motril Biodiversity Framework. As you know, Kumin or GBF is one of the has proposed some of the inclusive approaches, which are collective and inclusive in the process, which include adopting whole government approach, whole society approach, leaving no one behind, and especially making sure that no one is sidelined, especially in the conservation policies. However, as we know, we are working on the policies, but policies are also informed by what? By science. So we also need to make sure that the science that is informing the policy is also inclusive, collective, and also include all diverse knowledge systems so that we can be able to support better policy making and also the practice on the level. So this side event is hosted by UNESCO and co-organized by different organizations, led by the government of Malawi, as well as with the BES-Net partners, UNDP, UNEP-WCMC, and also is supported by different indigenous organizations, including the Center of Distinction on Indigenous and Local Knowledge, as well as International Forum on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, as well as other partners, including the Kenya National Trialogue, that is represented here by the National Museum of Kenya. We also supported by one of our key partners, SwedBio, which is also a partner and a donor for this project. Also to highlight that there's interpretation available for our online participants in French and English. So if you could go to the word icon and then choose your preferred language, and also to highlight that these interpretation services are not provided by the United Nations office in Nairobi, is provided by a third party. Now, without further ado, it's my honor to welcome you all, as well as our speakers. We are looking forward to hearing from them and sharing on how we can shift together toward this more inclusive approach. But now I will invite the director of Nairobi office, of UNESCO Nairobi office, to provide the opening remarks. And apologies from the director, he could not be here with us because he has another mission in Jakarta, but he felt like he wanted to be part of this team, and he provided a recording for his opening remarks. Alexandra, so.
Good evening, distinguished participants and speakers. I would like to welcome you to Nairobi and this essential event on embracing links in conservation science. On behalf of UNESCO and our partners, I'm honored to open this session. Our goal is to foster a paradigm shift in how we approach conservation science while advancing the implementation of the Kumin-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. The GBF Good evening, distinguished participants and speakers. I would like to welcome you to Nairobi and this essential event on embracing links in conservation science. On behalf of UNESCO and our partners, I'm honored to open this session. Our goal is to foster a paradigm shift in how we approach conservation science while advancing the implementation of the Kumin-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. The GBF presents us with an ambitious vision to halt and reverse biodiversity loss through a collective, inclusive approach where no one is left behind. A cornerstone of this approach is recognizing the indispensable role of scientific evidence along with the indigenous and local knowledge in conservation efforts. Indigenous people and local communities are at the forefront of this endeavor. They're not just resource users, but they are vital custodians of biodiversity and essential rights holders. Their wisdom, knowledge, practices, and innovations are crucial for effective conservation and restoration of our natural world. To achieve the GBF targets, we must shift how we conduct conservation science and develop new policies. Indigenous peoples and local communities must be at the center of this approach. At UNESCO, we have the policy of engaging with indigenous peoples, which puts indigenous peoples at the forefront of our work. We support combining scientific and indigenous knowledge for better decision-making, stronger biodiversity and cultural connections, and the promotion of sustainable resource use and management. Some UNESCO-designated sites, such as biosphere reserves, serve as pilot sites for this paradigm shift, ensuring conservation efforts are based on evidence, human rights, and inclusive governance. In conclusion, I hope this event will start an ongoing dialogue as we collectively pave the way for a future where indigenous and local knowledge systems are integral to our conservation science and policies. Thank you very much, and I wish you fruitful discussions.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Juanita Chavez from WCMC. And continuing with our agenda, we will have some opening reflections on prevailing norms and biases in conservation science and practice and their influence on Indigenous and local knowledge inclusion. To start with the opening reflections, I would like to welcome Ms. Georgie Carino. Ms. Georgie is a convener of the Center of Distinction on Indigenous and Local Knowledge, as well as the International Indigenous Forum on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, which is a self-organized network of Indigenous peoples and local communities under the IPBES. She is currently a senior policy advisor for Forest Peoples Program and was a co-lead author of the second edition of Local Biodiversity Outlook. Ms. Georgie will provide an opening reflections from the Indigenous lens on prevailing norms and biases in conservation and how they influence the inclusions of Indigenous and local knowledge. So, Georgie, we're very happy having you here and ready to hear your opening reflections. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you for inviting me to speak at this exchange. So in preparing for this meeting, I asked myself, where and when do we begin consideration of an Indigenous lens on the subject before us? For me, it begins in recalling the origins and the development of modern concepts of conservation vis-a-vis Indigenous peoples. The modern conservation movement arose during a period of rapid industrialization, giving rise to notions of preserving special areas of so-called pristine nature or wilderness, untouched by the ravages of people. President Ulysses Grant, who was fervently against native peoples, created Yellowstone National Park on tribal lands as a distinct political act, enclosing an area widely used by the Kiowa, Blackfeet, Cayuse, Coeur d'Alene, Shoshone, Nez Perce, and other tribes for its abundant resources for a long duration during their early and even recent history. The evidence has been deeply researched by scientists and archaeologists using modern tools of science to date hundreds of cultural objects found in the park. Yellowstone National Park, 150 years after its establishment, has now become an emblem of untouched nature. It is in fact an area in which humans were present for over 10,000 years, and the history and traditions of Indigenous peoples in Yellowstone are as rich as the landscape itself. This park also embodies an idea in Western philosophy that people are separate from nature, which has become the model for nature conservation in modern times, whereas Native American philosophy always sees nature and people as deeply intertwined. Today, the irony must not be lost on us that we are considering new paradigms of conservation science against the backdrop of 150 years of state-sanctioned approaches informed by conservation science versus thousands of years of indigenous traditions and knowledge. The history of Yellowstone Park, in fact, remains true for most national parks and protected areas, and also true for most indigenous peoples and local communities. How do we reconcile this requirement for conservation vis-a-vis the custodians of these areas? But of course, alongside these stories of loss, we need to capture the everyday stories of enduring human-nature interactions of many indigenous peoples. Their stories comprise a narrative which must continue to be told about ways of being and living, upholding balance, reciprocity, and harmony with nature. As the world is poised to implement Target 3 of the KMGBF to extend conservation over 30% of lands and seas in the next 7 years, which is the enduring narrative and which are the ways of capturing these stories? I will give a few examples. Local Biodiversity Outlooks, a publication highlighting the stories of the collective actions of indigenous peoples and local communities and their contributions to the strategic plan for biodiversity, has been one way of highlighting these stories. These reports have informed the IPBES Global Assessment of Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, which in turn has deeply informed the goals and targets of the KMGBF. The KMGBF monitoring framework now includes indicators to measure land use change and land tenure on the traditional territories of indigenous peoples and local communities, as well as the percentage of peoples practicing traditional occupations and the vitality of indigenous languages. Another key indicator is our participation in decision-making about biodiversity at all levels. So I think these are some of the ways in which indigenous peoples are making our contributions to the CBD, to IPBES, and to solving the crisis we face today. And I think this is one lens and one narrative through which we must understand our urgent tasks. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Gigi. Continuing these opening reflections, I would like to welcome Dr. Paris Kariuki. She's a doctor of, she's a researcher, the scientist at the Kenyan Resource Center for the Indigenous Knowledge at the National Museums of Kenya, where she promotes and implements transdisciplinary, multidisciplinary, and interinstitutional projects at national and regional levels. She's also a member of the International Society of Ethnobiology and previously served in the IPBES. Oh, okay. Dr. Paris is a member of the International Society of Ethnobiology and previously served in the IPBES Task Force on Indigenous and Local Knowledge. She's also founding member of the Kenyan National Trialogue. Please, Dr. Kariuki, you have the floor to provide some reflections on prevailing norms and biases in conservation from ILK researcher perspective. Thank you.
Thank you. And I want to thank the organizers for inviting me. And I also want to thank all of you for coming. As you've heard, my name is Paris Kariuki, and I work at the Kenya Resource Center for Indigenous Knowledge here in Kenya. And I want to acknowledge my colleague, Patrick Maundu, who mentored me into documenting Indigenous knowledge. So as we talk about how researchers approach Indigenous knowledge, I would want to first acknowledge that most of us are schooled in the conventional or in the what I would call formal education. So all of us, including myself and other people that are studying or that are looking at indigenous knowledge, indigenous and local knowledge, are schooled in the other school of knowledge. And so most of the times we use a lens, the lens of what we've learned and what we know. And so we sometimes are not very open to understanding indigenous knowledge. And we know that it is a whole knowledge by itself and it has its own philosophies and other issues. So the lens that we use is the science, if I may talk about conventional knowledge as science. Then also there is this tendency to treat indigenous knowledge not as a science. And I don't know whether I'm understood when I say that it is not taken as a science, but like another knowledge system that science needs to study because science is more superior. So we use scientific methods to prove whether the knowledge is working or not working. So maybe one of the biases is that we are already schooled in the other school of knowledge, and so we go with an attitude and we go to study and to look using that lens. Then of course also, we want to validate. We want to validate the knowledge. We want to validate what we've had. We want to validate conservation approaches by comparing indigenous and local knowledge with science. And I want to acknowledge what Georgie has talked about, that when we look back and look at our own backgrounds and our own homes, like here in Kenya, most of the well-conserved areas, Mount Kulal, Aman and Biosphere Reserve, the Kaya forests at the coastal Kenya, which have the highest endemicity of species, they are conserved by indigenous people. And the indigenous people do not live separate, but they live within, they live as part of the ecosystem. And so, like she has said, sometimes when we are trying to have conservation approaches that we call modern, we want to put them aside and then put them aside so that the conservation areas are without people. And that is something that sometimes science does not. And then the issue of bringing it, what is foreign, and then imposing it on people, which at times also brings a bit of rebellion. So I also want to talk about the traditional approaches. The other way is that we also look at the indigenous and local knowledge in conservation. And in this case, I want to talk about the traditional farming systems as an example. The use of trash lines, for those who remember them, the slash and burn, pastoralism that is practiced in most of the arid and semi-arid parts of Africa, and even the traditional farming systems. So sometimes we look at them, we dismissed them, we went to monocropping, we went to other forms of farming, but now they come back when they are quoted with other terms like agroecology, which is gaining momentum. They also come back and they are quoted as organic farming, which was previously what the indigenous and local people were doing. And then we promoted these as the conventional or the other modern ways of farming as what should be the issue, but now we are going back. But they come back not as the knowledge of the local people, but as new knowledge. I've just given the example of agroecology. If you look at some of the principles that are there. So maybe it's an issue of looking and wanting to understand how do we, as scientists, schooled in the conventional form of science, study or look at indigenous and local knowledge in the area of conservation. And I want to say I am a member of the Kenya National Trialogue that was formed by BES-Net back in 2019 during the Agrophone Trialogue. And there is one approach that, that has looked like it works, and that is the issue of having trialogues. And trialogues are having the science, the policy, and the practitioners, who are mostly the people on the ground, the local indigenous people, coming together and working together for conservation. And that maybe one approach that I would see like it can work. Then it's also the issue of using multiple evidence-based ways of doing things, so that we have ILK, or indigenous and local knowledge approaches, as one, while we have the conventional as another, and each independently can work, and we look at situations where both can work very well, and also looking at what can be integrated and taking the positive or the better in each case. And then, of course, the other issue of science is applying whatever approach that has been proven in different settings, which is not the case, because in the traditional sense, it was adapted to a certain area, and it was knowledge that had been observed over time. So maybe those are my reflections, and thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Georgie and Paris, for that great reflection. And you have critically highlighted some of the existing biases and the norms that exist in the conservation science. And again, going back to the GBF, we are saying we need a more inclusive approach. So we are going to transition to a panel dialogue, try to understand first how we can try to address some of these biases, but more important, what are some of the enabling factors that can help us shift to this paradigm shift? And I'm going to do a bit of modification. So there's one of the speaker who is supposed to provide a concluding remarks, but also she's going to contribute to the panel dialogue, Maria Tengo. And Maria Tengo, I'll start with you. Maria Tengo is principal researcher in the sustainability science at the Stockholm Resilience Center. Maria, I know you're one of the founding member of the multiple evidence-based approach, and multiple evidence-based approach has been recognized even within the JBF, the EBS process, as one of the instruments to support working of different knowledge systems. Could you please first walk us through the multiple evidence-based approach and what it means and how it can be part of this paradigm shift? Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me to the panel. I'm very happy to be here. Yes, so the multiple evidence base is very much a collective effort coming out of collaborations between SwedBio, Stockholm Resilience Center, but also many different organizations representing indigenous people and local communities. And I know several people here in the room has been part as well. So such as IFB, the COD-ILK, Tebteba, African Biodiversity Networks, and or organizations. And I want to start with saying that if you're interested, there's now a very nice guide at SwedBio's homepage. That's swed.bio/meb, M-E-B. So there you can find more detail, including of the story, how it has developed. And I think my colleagues here have already talked about some key elements. You were talking about trialogues, and I think dialogues is a key aspect of really creating synergies or weaving knowledge systems in a way that it can really contribute to multiple interests and not just serve, for example, scientific interest in connecting with indigenous knowledge for a specific purpose. So we have been doing these dialogues actually since 2012. The first dialogue was in Gunayala, in indigenous territory in Panama. And their validation, as you were also mentioning, was brought up as a key challenge. That often the case is that scientist wants to validate indigenous and local knowledge by using scientific tools and methods. So the multiple evidence-based idea comes really out of that different knowledge comes from different knowledge systems, and you need to think about the integrity of each knowledge system. So when you bring different knowledge contribution around a specific issue, you need to think about how these different knowledges can be presented by the knowledge holders on their own terms and not through science. And that's kind of the starting point, that the contributions are represented on their own terms and by the knowledge holders themselves. So that's a key aspect of it. And we've been trying to illustrate this with these multicolored streams leading to a kind of platform of an enriched understanding. But of course, I think many people have been saying this for a long time, the need to change the interface, but then how do you do it? So we've also been trying to articulate better, also in collaborations with different organizations, piloting a multiple evidence-based approach. And Gaturu will talk more about that in a second, but that you need one thing, the important part or component of task, or to mobilize knowledge and making sure there are appropriate and culturally appropriate and fair processes for mobilizing knowledge to bring to this enriched picture. And the second task is to actually translate and to make sure that all actors involved understand each other as much as possible, still respecting the integrity and the differences of these complementary knowledge systems. A third task is the importance of then jointly negotiating or analyzing together. So where is there overlap? Where is there disagreement or just frictions? And in many cases that can lead to new understanding, right? Trying to address why are the information maybe different here or disagreeing. But that's a really key process, and that's also that is done in collaboration. And the fourth task is then synthesizing this. So I just wanted to remind you that the multiple evidence base was developed very much in the context of IPBES, of how can indigenous and local knowledge have a stronger presence in this different assessment, including the global assessment. And the synthesis is a challenging task, because that's often where indigenous and local knowledge falls out, because it's seen as maybe anecdotal or fragmented, etc. But so there's a key aspect of thinking about synthesis in a way that you also allow for dissensus or disagreement or different kinds of evidence in that synthesis. And the fifth task, which is actually the most fundamental, I think, we call it apply. So the point of really applying this knowledge in different contexts. And to me, one of the things that I've felt the strongest lesson, if I would say one thing of guidance for how to do this, creating synergies between different knowledge systems, is the idea of usefulness for all involved. So how do you make sure that everyone who comes together have a useful application for this knowledge that's generated? And that should be really fundamental from the beginning. Yes, so that was a bit of introduction to the multiple evidence base, and I think I'll stop there for.
Super. Thank you so much, Maria. I think this is a very good transition to Gaduru, because you have highlighted the critical steps in applying the multiple evidence-based approach, which include how to mobilize the knowledge, how to translate this knowledge coming from different knowledge system, how to synthesize this knowledge system, and negotiate and synthesize in the process, and even how to apply. And I know, Mr. Gaduru, through the Gado Community Foundation in Mount Kenya, you have been piloting the multiple evidence-based approach. Could you please walk us through how has been your experience in piloting this, which has been some of the success stories, which probably you think could be replicated to other countries?
Yeah, thank you so much. And as you've heard, my name is Gaduru Boro. I've been working with the Institute for Culture and Ecology and Gado Community Foundation. And those two organizations have given us opportunities working together with the other partners here to pilot and try out some of these processes in multiple evidence base. And actually, the main thing that we've been trying to do at the moment is we realize that the multiple evidence base, if we go straight and try to implement, then we will have the indigenous and local knowledge disadvantaged because of the situation of where it is. After many years, as Georgie has said, many years of marginalization and devaluation, so even some of the holders of that knowledge were not confident enough. They have not been confident enough to apply it, especially in situations that actually would relate with other knowledge holders. So they've been shy in one way. And so our work has been to sort of give them the confidence so that they can work and also recognize and respect that knowledge and start working with it, because it's there, but due to many years of having not been used and also being exposed to that marginalization and devaluation, then those people have not been confident enough to work with it. So we've been doing what we call community dialogues. These are processes in knowledge mobilization, especially indigenous knowledge, holding community dialogues at the local level with members of those communities in around Mount Kenya, in Kiva area, in Machakos, in Tharaka-Nithi, to work with especially the holders of indigenous knowledge, the elders, the custodians, so that they can bring back, they can rejuvenate that knowledge and also internally validate the knowledge so that once they go out, of course, all of them know what they are doing and know what they are saying, and therefore they will not feel shy or not confident enough talking about their own knowledge. And one way, several ways of bringing back this knowledge, we've been using eco-cultural maps where these communities draw their ecosystems on maps of the past, maps of the present, maps of the future. And these give them opportunities to also interact even with sort of knowledge that is conventional. When we are talking about knowledge of the map of the past, of the present, of the future, these communities are actually assessing the changes that have happened over time on their landscapes. Then we also do eco-cultural calendars, because it's not only reviving and validating the knowledge, but we want, or they want to also start living that knowledge, implementing it. So the eco-cultural calendars and the maps, they also fall into place very well, because the rituals, their social life, they are very much intertwined with what happens on the landscapes. And trying now to go out and work with the other knowledge systems. We've been using innovative processes like walking workshops, where the indigenous knowledge holders and the other knowledge holders, they just have dialogues and they walk about, they observe the landscapes, and together they identify the challenges that they would like to work around together. And now the phase that we are in at the moment is how to bring them closer so that they can work together, identify challenges together, work around solutions together, and they implement, as Maria has said, they implement joint implementation, co-collaboration, co-production of this knowledge systems. But of course, there have been challenges along the way because when we are talking about this, we are talking about reforming, especially the scientific knowledge system. But are scientists ready to change? Are they ready to reform so that they do not look at indigenous and local knowledge from the perspective that we have heard from Dr. here, that they want to validate, they want to go into this indigenous knowledge and understand it, rather than respecting it and looking at it on equal terms with transparent perspectives. That's all we are looking for. So that change of mindset has been slow. Of course, we can see it happening. I came from the International Society of Ethnobotany, and listening to those scientists working together with indigenous knowledge, you can see there are progressive steps towards reforms, but of course it will take time. And again, the indigenous and local people themselves, they haven't really gained that confidence. They are still a little bit shy, but we are moving towards that. So there are challenges along the way, and the institutional reforms themselves, because there is no way we can work together with science and indigenous knowledge without having institutional reforms. The GBF 2022, how much of this, especially on the use of indigenous knowledge and local knowledge, how much are we integrating or using this in the national assessments? So I think those institutional reforms are also taking a slow pace, and this is also challenging the process. But all in all, it's a process that can actually be used to bring these different knowledge systems to work together, to collaborate in solving local problems. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gaduru. I feel I'm not the only one in the room being touched by the great work that you are doing. And as part of the reflection, what I gathered from your intervention, that I think we need to start changing our mindset on how we approach the communities, not as knowledge providers, but actually as the critical actors in the knowledge production. And you talk about, for example, engaging them in the co-production, engaging them as part of co-designing of the research process. But also importantly, what we really think about internally validating the knowledge. So it's not taking the knowledge out of the context and then go and validate their knowledge in the lab, but they have the power to validate their knowledge. And this, again, transition very well. Again, you talk about institution of reforms. And we are lucky here to have Dr. Lydian Chimpepo, who is the focal point of the Malawi National, the IBES focal point for Malawi. So again, we know that IBES has been one of the body that has been promoting this reform, but also she served as co-chair for the Malawi National Ecosystem Assessment, and also they have been adopting the multiple based evidence approach. So Dr. Lydian, if you could walk us through how, through the National Ecosystem Assessment, as well as your experience through the IBES, how the multiple evidence-based approach is being applied in Malawi, especially bringing the communities at the core part of the research process.
Thank you, Dr. Kalanja. I will not thank the organizers because Malawi is part of the organizers for this event, but I would thank the participants for your coming, because without your presence, this meeting could have failed. So thank you very much for coming. To start with, maybe as Joseph has said, as an IP-based focal point, after attending some few IP-based plenaries, I am aware that IP-based has placed indigenous people and local communities at the core of the processes in the assessments. So we have seen indigenous and local communities participating in the global assessment on biodiversity and ecosystem services, the regional assessments, and also the thematic assessments that we have so far. And similarly for us in Malawi, we have adopted the methodology of IP-based, and we have made sure that as we are implementing the National Ecosystem Assessment, we are incorporating all the knowledge systems. So we are engaging the local communities in Malawi in the process of developing our National Ecosystem Assessment. We launched the National Ecosystem Assessment in 2020, and our National Ecosystem Assessment has prioritized 3 ecosystems, the terrestrial, wetland, and aquatic. And when we initially started the process, we involved representatives from the local communities. We then decided to go out and engage more, because during the launch, the number of local communities who were presented were very few. So we went out and reached out to 8 districts in the country. Malawi has got 3 regions, North, South, and Central. So we selected few districts through which we engaged the local communities. So we had a framing workshop, and during this workshop, we initially started by creating awareness about what national ecosystem assessment is all about, and then how they can get involved. And as usual, before we could get their knowledge, we had to employ the free and prior informed consent so that we can be able to incorporate the knowledge that is going to be shared by them into the assessment process. So we had those 3 regional framing workshops. We worked with the local communities. They contributed to the policy question that we are focusing on in the assessment. The policy question, basically, if it is on research, we can say the research questions. So those are the areas on which the assessment is focusing on. So the local knowledge, local communities had an input into the policy questions which our assessment is based on. And there are some components which the local communities have actually mainstreamed in the policy questions that we are addressing. For example, they are looking at the multiple value of biodiversity. After engaging with the communities, we noted that apart from the science that we know, maybe we know very little about the multiple value of biodiversity, different species that are found in their localities, because they have been there living with nature and taking care of nature in their own way. And you could see that even some of the knowledge that they have regarding the species, especially the medicinal plants, the science gets that knowledge and use it to produce, in pharmaceutical products. So in terms the thematic area on multiple value and also co-management and co-governance, how they are able to, manage their natural resources, the structure that they have at local level, and also the connectivity of biodiversity and their tradition, beliefs, and also the intergenerational knowledge transfer, where we learned that the knowledge transfer now, they're sort of losing out in terms of the knowledge because of the technology and modernization, which we are all experiencing, and also the knowledge about the risk, disaster risk reduction. So I am glad there was a mention of the Trialogue. We have also employed the Trialogue, where we brought together the local indigenous people and local communities together with the scientists and also the policymakers. So we looked at the policy questions that we had and also mainstream the ideas from the local communities such that we came up with a consensus, and we are certain that when we complete this assessment, it will be nationally owned. There is that ownership between the policymakers, the scientists, as well as the local communities. So that's a milestone which we have seen. Apart from bringing the local communities in framing workshop, we had some follow-up meetings going to following the local communities where they are coming from, their homes, especially that we noted during the framing workshop that not all knowledge holders were present in the framing workshop because some knowledge holders are old, they can't travel. So we had to follow them up in their homes and learn from them how they have been managing biodiversity and what practices are still relevant, which we can still adopt and incorporate in policies, conservation policies. We also had feedback sessions after completing the scoping report, having it approved by the biodiversity platform. We went back, present the final scoping report so that they realize that whatever the input they made in the process is still incorporated in the scoping report. And at the moment, we are now at the process of evaluation, bringing information together, lighting up chapters, and we are still working with the local communities. And we believe we are eager to work with them throughout the process to the end. Some of the local communities that we have started engaging with, we have worked with them more throughout the process. Some we have engaged them more than twice, and so far we have worked with over 300 local communities in the country. Another area which we have also considered so that we don't lose local knowledge on the way, is our team, the National Ecosystem Assessment Team, lobbied for inclusion of a representative of local knowledge in the Biodiversity Advisory Committee, the committee which is responsible for approving all biodiversity initiative in the country. So the scoping report was approved by the same, as well as we are progressing. When we come up with a technical report, it will also be approved with the same advisory committee. And the presence of a representative in this committee assures us that local knowledge, local input, local knowledge input that has been taken on board throughout will remain there and will also contribute to policies in biodiversity conservation. So it's not only from the NIA process, but we believe that the presence of this member, a local community member in the Biodiversity Advisory Committee will go a long way contributing to all processes involving biodiversity conservation in the country. So we are there, we are one, together we can win. We believe that the local communities are the custodian of natural resources and they know more than the scientists who are in the labs, maybe in the academic institutions, and also we noted that normally plans are made centrally, and when it comes to implementation of the initiatives that are recommended, it's the local communities. So their involvement from the word go will ensure that there is that ownership, and when it comes to the findings, when they also feed into the policy decisions at higher level, and during implementation, they will embrace, the findings and be able to implement whatever initiative that are going to be recommended. In a nutshell, that's what I can say about the way Malawi is integrating indigenous and local knowledge in the ecosystem assessment. And suffice to say that already what we have already started working on is feeding into the National Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan, and will also contribute to some knowledge, and also when we are reporting in the national report on biodiversity. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Vivian, for sharing the Malawi team, and much gratitude also to the Malawi team. And personally, I'm highly encouraged to see this progress and to see over 300 knowledge holders contributing to the national process that is going to contribute to the biodiversity process is very remarkable, and we urge you to continue with the same spirit. I would like now to move to Rhoda. Rhoda, again, looking at the GBF, especially target 23, which call for gender transformation. And you as an Indigenous woman, we know the critical role of the Indigenous women in biodiversity conservation. Picking up from where Dr. Chimpopo talked about, she mentioned one of the challenges has been loss of knowledge. And like also Indigenous women, also you're very critical in promoting intergenerational knowledge transfer. So through your work in West Pokot, how do you think Indigenous women as agent of change can be part of this paradigm shift that we're talking about? Over to you.
Okay, thank you. My name is Rhoda Rotina, as you have been told, and you are welcome to Kenya. I come from Kenya, and I come from pastoral community, all Pokot peoples. I'm a woman, and I love being a woman because women are great. And another thing I want to say is that I've heard that the indigenous knowledge is supposed to be put into laboratory. And I want to say that before there was history of science, there was history of indigenous knowledge. You have understood that? So this history of knowledge, which is from indigenous people, is actually knowledge that should be recognized and it should be taken seriously and respected. I want to say that I work with the communities local communities and indigenous communities, and women, working with the women-led organization and women-led biodiversity. And we have realized that women have knowledge which have been acquired from time immemorial, multi-generational knowledge. And this knowledge has been synthesized as time goes. And this knowledge that women have, they know the species, the different species that it is in their ecosystem. They know the dynamics of the ecosystem, and they know the management of the land. And so women are actually the custodians of this knowledge. And if they are given chance, if good policies are done, supported for good policies, especially gender responsive policies, because we know in Kenya now, we have the devolution, but the devolution is still going a process because we don't have the gender policies. Like where I come from, it is only 2 weeks ago that we have finished the gender policy. And still it has a lot of teething problem. So if we can be supported as women to be able to make the governments or to lobby, to negotiate and have a platform where we can work and advocate for gender policies, which are positive and especially directed to biodiversity conservation, we shall be able to go very far. Secondly, I would like to say that as women, we need people to understand that we are not working. I think I said yesterday a comment that we are not working from a vacuum. We have the knowledge and the systems which drive us as indigenous women. So the only thing we need is the capacity building on things that we don't have. Like the indigenous woman, we don't have maybe the technology. You are in another level from another world, but the knowledge on the ground, we are better off than you because we have it ourselves. So if we can get capacity building on the resource mobilization, on funding, and even tailor-made capacities made through the workshops, we shall be able also again to make sure that there is sustainable biodiversity for now and the generations to come. Another thing I want to say is that we used to say up, down, but now it's bottom up, or we say horizontal, because it is for us and all of us. There is no point of going up and there is no point of going that way. It is supposed to be a cycle where each one of us is supposed to be giving our expertise, a perspective, a decision in order for good strategies of biodiversity conservation to get better results. And on that, we find that it's important for scientists and researchers to integrate our knowledge as women on issues of the ecosystem, as I said. And then when you are doing your surveys, we give the qualitative, you give us the qualitative, and qualitative plus quantitative gives good answers. Quantitative alone cannot give us a proper reason to say that this is science. So our side, since it has been synthesized, as I said, then we give you the qualitative, you give us the quantitative, and now it is equilibrium. And for that reason, again, I would say that women should be promoted in a way that they should be able to be given chances in different levels of decision-making. And even in the GBF, women should be given chances to air out their aspirations, to air out their needs, because whenever they are able to give that, they are giving that from their own need, because women have got some interconnection with the biodiversity and nature. We have the spiritual connection. And if I give an example, when a mother gives birth, the umbilical cord in my people, you go and put it under a tree, showing that the child should grow as the tree is also growing. So that is part of the science and part of the spirituality that we have that makes our people realize that we have to conserve that. Apart from that, there is the issue of the collaboration. We need a genuine collaboration. We need a sincere collaboration and a long-term collaboration so that we can work together, achieve together. No one should be left behind. And also, when you come to our communities, and especially for women, we have also our own cultural governances. Those are the things that you need to respect the protocols that we have, you have to respect so that also we can have proper way of doing things, of respecting one another. And that is what we need to have. And then there is the issue of the equity and the benefit sharing. You find that most of the time, the woman is the one who suffers a lot. She works on the shamba, she gets nothing. Others work on the shamba or farm, I don't know, I'm speaking in Kiswahili, I'm sorry. And then they get, so that equity. And especially even now when others come to work with us, even the revenue is not for the woman. So if we can get the equal share or the equity sharing of the resources and other things, and then this woman will be empowered economically to be able to talk about what she wants and what is supposed to be good for the health of the environment, as well as the conservation of the biodiversity. Finally, I would like to say that women are the transferers of knowledge. As you sit with the children, I think women sit more with the children than the fathers and even others. When we cook, we tell the children the stories. And these are stories about nature, stories about our language, stories about our people, and many other things. So they are the custodians. And for that reason, they need just to be supported to refertilize their language, to refertilize their stories. And we need to be supported to document what we have, because we have the things, and times goes and the world is dynamic, so that these things can remain for the future generations and others to come and learn from what we are doing. So in a nutshell, I would want to say that what we are doing there, finally, what we are doing there, we have seen the species, as I said, we are doing what they call the seed banking. We are now having collections of seeds from the groups that we are leading and with other women, and exchanging those seeds to make sure that the species are not lost. And also the preservation of those seeds, it is done traditionally. We either put them in the pot and mix with ash, or we put them in the calabash and put above the fireplace, and even hang others. And that is a way of making sure that the seeds are for now and future generation. And then we are also we have already established nurseries, and we are continuing indigenous tree nurseries, which are actually of different species, to make sure that we have different species for different places, and zoning also the areas. We have zoned the areas to make sure that we know what is needed here and what is needed where. And as my brother said, we have also done a purport calendar to help the people to be prepared, early preparation for shocks and many other things, even for disaster and so on. And these are things women draw themselves. In January, they know what type of plants are supposed to be grown in January, February, and they name them in their traditions. So we have up to December. Our calendar starts in March and finishes in March next year, because that's the time when the rains start. When rains start, we say life is starting. So they draw that, and they know every other plant. So the plants that scientists call such and such a things, bougainvillea and whatever, we have them in our language. And that is why this traditional knowledge or the indigenous knowledge should be respected, because even the names are there. If we have the names and you have the names, then this knowledge is supposed to be respected. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Rhoda, for highlighting women as the heart of this paradigm shift. And you clearly indicated women as custodians of the knowledge. So as we aim to include this indigenous and local knowledge together with science, we need to also work with the custodian of knowledge, and women as one of those key critical custodian of the knowledge. And then also preventing the loss of knowledge, ensuring this is transferred to the young ones. And then women play a critical role into that process. I know we are having a very interesting discussion. Actually, this dialogue, as it was indicated, the concept note, it should be a start of ongoing dialogue. So this is just the start, and then we're also going to continue later during the cocktail. But because of time, we are going to open the floor probably for one reflection. So, and I see one hand. So we do to one hand, and I request you maybe if you can keep it to 1 minute, please. And then we're gonna give it to Addis on this side. And then I don't know how to overcome this, but we can continue the conversation in the cocktail discussion. Please, sir, if you can keep it 2 minutes as well. And we have not forgotten our online participants. If I may request my colleague, Peter Bates and also Sophia, please to, to make sure the conversation is ongoing on the online, and in case if there's something, please flag on my teams. Thank you. To you, sir. 1 minute, please.
Thank you very much, Musa from Uganda. Mine just specifically goes to Loda. Thank you for the wonderful passion actually on women empowerment and also aspects on how we can improve society. Yeah, so I tend to see that men are being marginalized in the sense of taking much interest in these aspects when it comes to transfer of knowledge, but also the boy child. How are we going to strike the balance if we only side with women? It's not that I'm a man, but I'm looking at the whole of humanity aspect moving forward. So it's something I wanted to see your reflection on and how actually we can carry on also having men on board. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for that reflection. We're going to take the reflection or question from there, then I'll give it to the panel.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much, our presenters. I just wanted to agree with Rhoda on the women empowerment issue. Indeed, women are the custodian of indigenous and local knowledge. From experience, from Malawi, while we are trying to integrate indigenous and local knowledge and involving the local community members, we've had some challenges in making women open up in the presence of men. They would not speak up. So we had to change our methodology to separate women and men. And we realized that we got strong, invaluable insights from women about indigenous and local knowledge and conservation of biodiversity and ecosystem. And I also wanted to agree with Gatulu about the confidence on indigenous and local knowledge holders. It is indeed a very important aspect to build confidence in them so that they should actually know the value of their knowledge. In Malawi, we tried to bring them together, trying to bring confidence in them. And the fact that they are able to be put together with policymakers in the Trialogue, the other stakeholders, as well as researchers. And the foremost thing was to go to the local community members, ask them to teach us as researchers. We want to learn the indigenous and local knowledge way of conserving biodiversity. That was the most powerful tool that we used. And they were able to teach us. You know, when you're teaching somebody, you teach with confidence. So we learned, the researchers, the scientists learned about indigenous and local knowledge. So this really worked, and it built confidence in the indigenous and local knowledge. And they were able to sit down with us and co-design the assessment focus, as well as, you know, the taking the leading role during the working workshops, co-defining the agenda of the working workshops. And we also had some capacity building with them, bringing them together with other local community members from other regions, from different cultures, exchanging experiences, challenges, and lessons learned. And on top of that, we also had to build capacity with the authors, the scientists. They should learn on how they can integrate indigenous and local knowledge in the assessment. And this was also amazing. And at the global level, we also have indigenous and local knowledge move. I'm the captain of that move. And we are sharing different aspects of experience on how other countries are actually applying their indigenous and local knowledge. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Aris, for that. because she's my colleague, she's going to understand that seconds, then I give it to my panelists. Yeah, thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Osi from South Africa, from Youth in Your Oceans. Thank you so much for the address. I just wanted to mention something, the importance of women in our society. You know, you give a woman an onion, they're able to create a meal out of it. You give a woman a house, they're able to create a home. Give a woman a boy, they're able to create a man out of that. So I want to compliment women's extraordinary abilities to be able to multiply. And I think us as men have to consider that strongly, as Rhoda was mentioning, of the importance of women in our society in order to change our society and in order to improve upon our society. So for that, I just wanted to commend you, ladies. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So now I'll hand over to Rhoda to maybe in case you have any response to the question that was raised for Ugandan colleague.
Okay, thank you. I may not convince you, but I think I will try. But I want to say that as a mother, I have a child who is a girl and a boy. So there's no way I can be separated from them. Recently, the person through the SwedBio, the biodiversity, Women for Biodiversity, are the ones who are supporting us as women to do our conservation. And then as we were working, the boys came and the girls. And then I was saying, these are boys and these are girls. How do I explain that they are coming for the seminar I called and I didn't call them? And then I realized that where there is a mother, the youth child must be there. So now we are trying to integrate them. We have to move together. And I think a child approaches the mother first before he approaches the father. So we are together. We have decided that it is called Women Biodiversity, and then the youth are coming in. We are supporting them side event. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rhoda. I know the discussion is very interesting. We have a cocktail, which is a networking, so we can carry it for this discussion. Just one comment before I pass over to my co-moderator, Juanita. I think one of the aspects we wanted to showcase during this course, during this side event, is speaking with one voice. And at the beginning, I actually did not introduce the speakers, and this was for the reason. So as you can see, all our speakers highlighted the importance of indigenous and local knowledge, but they come from different institutions. They represent different stakeholder groups. So we have Dr. Ridan Chimpopo, who is representing the government. She's part of the environmental affairs. So the government is already on board. We have people from the indigenous communities and local communities represented by Georgie, Rhoda, and Gaturu. And also we have people from the research community, so which is Paris as well as Maria. So we already, practicing this paradigm shift. So we only need to scale this up. So now I pass over to Juanita. Over to you.
Thank you. And thank you for that, for those wonderful, powerful, and inspiring presentations. And I will pass the floor to Maria for a very challenging task, and it's for closing remarks. And in a few minutes, what did you get from all these contributions? Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's a privilege to be able to come back, and I would like to invite my fellow speakers as well. But some things just to re-emphasize some things that has been said, and I would like to start with saying how this is a practical challenge, and we need to think to how to do it better. But it is also, as Georgie started out saying, it's also a story about fundamental inequalities. So it's not really about, okay, we can sort it out. We really need to think and act fundamentally in new and different ways. So this shift is really critical, and it's really important to set things straight, and also to really bring in the human rights-based approach. Also, when we think it's about knowledge, it's also about human rights, right? And implement the human rights-based approach. So I think that's really key, and I think that was coming out in the stories that we heard, how important it is to build confidence and to strengthen and support And often the entry point is that indigenous and local knowledge can have supplementary insight to scientific knowledge. And I think that's also, we heard that that's obvious, right? We heard different elements of that. It's the understanding what's really going on the ground. It's having the long time depth. It's really about understanding human nature together, which we kind of, as Western scientists, have decided to forget. So there's many important complementarities there, but then it's also so important to remember that, okay, so for us scientists, it's about supplementary knowledge to the understanding. But on the ground, it's about fundamental governance value for indigenous people and local communities. And it's knowledge that is in use on the ground and contributes to holistic, rich, multidimensional aspirations for people on the ground. And I think that's, so for me as a scientist, I think the really important thing is like, how can I, as a scientist, support that? How can I support the knowledge systems, the knowledge holders, and the governance systems that are in place already? And as I think the global biodiversity assessment from IPBES showed in many different ways how key, how important this knowledge is for both generating and protecting and revitalizing the biodiversity that we all depend on. That's really critical. And again, I think we have many different illustrations of that. So excellent. And I think it's actually, it's difficult to summarize, but it's also easy because I think that the stories were very rich and tied into each other. One last thing, I think maybe, well, no, there were many more things, but I think the genuine collaboration and partnership is also really essential. So how can we make that happen? And there, I think institutional change is really needed. You were also mentioning that, Gaturu, and I think, for example, the COD-ILK is a very important part of such institutions. We need, like, what are institutions that can strengthen knowledge and governance systems, and also what are institutions that can help secure the interactions between knowledge systems, so it doesn't come down to individual people that have been taught the right thing, so to speak. So I think this, have conversations about what are the institutions that we need, that's key, important. And okay, so maybe then to end with the importance as a scientist to be open-minded and to suspend judgment, and to be agile, and in particular, always when going in, to reflect on your own knowledge. What is it that you know? What is it that you don't know? And what's the limitation? What can your knowledge contribute, but what's the limitation of that knowledge? And I think the key aspect of being humble also, and in this interaction, as you were also sharing, that scientists, I think scientists have a lot of lessons to learn on how to behave and to take a step back and be prepared to listen. And I think when that listening and the dialogue is happening, that's where we can move forward together.
So thank you so much, Maria, for that. I will not add anything because I don't want to preempt that. As we move to the closing of the session, I'm honored to close this session. I would like to first by appreciating our distinguished speakers for your valuable contribution, and starting us off on how to think and to start changing the mindset and motivating us so that we can also be part of the enabling factor of this paradigm shift. So thank you so much for that. And I would request our audience to please help me to applaud our participants. And on behalf of all the organizing team, I would like to appreciate each and every one of you. I know it's on a Friday, and especially if you're in Kenya, you know how Friday to me is. Like most of the people here in Kenya on Friday, they stop working at noon. So we know how much sacrifice you have made, to come join us at this evening. So thank you so much. And just to acknowledge that this side event was made possible by the BES-Net donors, which include the International Climate Initiative of the federal government of Germany, as well as the SwedBio or at the Stockholm Decision Center. And at the website, if you look at one of the slides, you can learn more about the BES-Net. I think it's going to be highlighted in the slide about the NA initiative, which is one of the flagship within the BES-Net led by UNEP-WCMC. And if you want to learn more about our indigenous and local knowledge component, as highlighted by Malawi and Kenya and other countries, you can visit UNESCO Links website. So thank you so much for joining. And I also take this chance to welcome you to cocktail networking, which is just outside on your right as you walk outside. Please join us as we continue this conversation. And thank you so much for our online participant for participating. We are going to, as we say in Kenya, Sambaza is sending through virtual platform the cocktail so that you can enjoy with us together. Thank you so much.